Let me get rid of this music real quick. All right. How's everything? Is everything looking good? Everything's smooth, running and everything? Yep, 180. No lag, right? Good. All right, cool. Number 5, essence and phenomenon. A categories of essence and phenomenon. Now they're gonna go over why they use certain words, why they translated the words in the English text like they did with other ones, because of the Vietnamese words, and the closest representation to English was those things for them. All right. The essence category refers to the synthesis of all internal aspects, as well as the obvious and stable relations that define the existence, motion, and development of things, phenomena, and ideas. The phenomenon category refers to the external manifestation of those internal aspects and relations in specific conditions. So one's internal, one's external. Looks like of those internal. Okay, cool. Understanding essence and phenomenon can be challenging at first, but it is very important for materialist dialectical analysis. Essence should not be confused with form. Form represents the stable internal relations of a component of the component.
Are you on?
Yeah. What's up?
Because Lynn said page 180, but you're not on 180.
Yes, I am.
Where are you?
Yes, I am. I'm on 180. Essence
Down
and
at the
phenomenon.
bottom?
No, at the top.
Okay, you're at the top of 180. Thank you.
All right, let's start this over again. Okay. Understanding essence and phenomenon can be challenging at first, but it is very important for materialist dialectical analysis. Essence should not be confused with form. Form represents the stable internal relations of the component content of a subject, whereas essence represents the synthesis of all internal aspects, as well as all obvious and stable attributes which define the existence, motion, and development of a subject. Phenomena are simply external manifestations of a subject which occurs in specific conditions. The essence of a subject is not dependent on condition, whereas in different conditions, the same subject will exhibit different phenomenon. For example, COVID-19 is essentially a specific virus strain. That is to say, all of the internal aspects and stable relations that define the existence, motion, and development of COVID-19 are synthesized as a virus, which we call COVID-19. The phenomenon of COVID-19, which can be observed in patients, would include symptoms such as fever, cough, trouble breathing, etc. The essence of a cloud is water vapor in the atmosphere. That is the synthesis. The coming together of all the internal stable relations and aspects which will determine how a cloud exists, moves, and develops over time. The phenomena of clouds are all the things we can sense. The appearance of big, fluffy white things in the air, shadow on the ground, and sometimes rain. Essence defines phenomenon and the internal attributes and stable relations will produce the phenomenon which can be observed. A cloud is not essentially defined as fluffy white thing in the air. That is just the appearance a cloud has to our human senses in certain specific conditions. B, dialectical relationships between essence and phenomenon. Essence and phenomenon both exist objectively as two unified but opposite sides. The unity between essence and phenomenon. Essence always manifests through phenomenon, and every phenomenon is always the manifestation of a specific essence. There is no pure essence that exists separately from phenomenon, and there is no phenomenon that does not manifest from any kind of essence. When essence changes, phenomenon also change accordingly. When essence appears, phenomenon also appears. When essence disappears, phenomenon also disappears. Therefore, Lenin said, the essence appears The appearance is essential. The opposition of essence and phenomenon. Essence is that which defines a thing. Phenomenon or ideas, while phenomenon are diversified and conditional. Essence is internal, while phenomenons are external. Essence is relatively stable, while phenomenon continuously change. Essence and phenomenons are simultaneously unified and opposite because neither can exist without the other. Yet, they have completely opposite features from one another. Discussing the essence and phenomenon of physical object is relatively straightforward. The essence will typically encompass the physical object or system itself. For example, a car engine is essentially a machine. That is to say, the synthesis of all the internal aspects, the engine parts, as well as the obvious and stable relations, the relationships between the parts of the engine, how they are assembled and work together in the engine system. That defines the existence, motion, and development of the engine. That way it works, are what essentially make it a car engine. All of these essential characteristics are eternal, relatively stable, and remain the same regardless of the condition of the engine, i.e., they continue to exist whether the engine is turned on or turned off, inoperable, etc. The phenomenon of the car engine are all the things that can be sensed from it, but this can vary a great deal depending on condition. When the car engine is turned off, it would be silent. It may be cool to the touch. It will be at rest. If the engine is turned on, the parts will move. It will become hot. It will make noise. In some situation, it might smoke or even catch fire. All these phenomena are conditional, unstable, and external to the engine itself. Which ideas and abstract thought, essence, and phenomenon becomes more difficult to determine and analyze. Lenin discussed this in his philosophical notebook, beginning with the quote from Hegel. Here's the quote. Dialectics, in general, is, quote, the pure movement of thought and notion, end quote, i.e., putting it without the mysticism of idealism. Human concepts are not fixed, but are internally in movement. They pass into one another. They flow into one another. Likewise, they do not reflect living life. Knowing that Hegel was an idealist, Lenin wanted to strip all idealism from his conception of dialectics, and thus made it clear that, quote, the pure movement of thought, end quote, simply refers to the fact that human thought is constantly changing, always in motion, within living human mind, writing, the analysis of concepts, the study of them, the, quote, art of operating with them, end quote. Engels always demands study of the movement of concepts and their interconnections and their mutual transitions. This is a description of materialist dialectics analysis of human thought. We must understand that human thoughts are always in motion while developing and always mutually impacting other thoughts. In particular, dialectics is the study of the opposition of the thing in itself, of the essence, stratum, substance, from the appearance, from being for others, quote unquote. Here, too, we see a transition, a flow from one to the other. The essence appears. The appearance is essential. Human thought goes endlessly deeper from appearances to essence, from essence to the first order, as it were, to essence of the second order, and so on without end. This is where Lenin introduces the concept of essence and phenomenon, or appearance, as Lenin puts it, as simultaneously oppositional and in unity. Essence refers to the qualities of nature and of thing in itself, its internal components, relations, etc., while phenomenon represents being for others, that which external observers can sense or witness of a subject. However, as Lenin notes, essence and phenomenon have a dialectical relationship with each other, a quote, flow from one to the other, end quote. The essence appears to exclude, wait, is that excluding? Exuding phenomenon, which can be sensed. Conscious thoughts also have essence and phenomenon of their own. Without thought, the development from essence to phenomenon is constant and inevitable. The essence of each thought leads to thought phenomenon, which develop in turn into the essence of new thoughts in a constant flow. In this sense, essence and phenomenon of abstract thought is somewhat different from essence and phenomenon of the physical object. But physical objects can have this same dialectical pattern of development. For example, the emissions from the engine of a car can be considered phenomenon of the engine. But as these phenomena build up in the air, along with the emissions from many other cars, they can develop into a physical subject with a new essence of its own, which we call air pollution. We can also think of the light which comes from the sun. The light itself can be thought as a phenomenon of the sun, but the light energy can be captured by a solar panel and converted into energy, creating a new subject with its own essence, which would describe as solar energy. In this sense, it is possible for phenomenon to have phenomenon. If you witness light waves in the desert which cause the optical illusion, then the illusion is the phenomenon of the light waves being the essence which exude the phenomenon of illusions. And the light waves are the phenomenon of the sun, the essential subject which exudes the phenomenon of light waves. Essence and phenomena can also be contextual. In some contexts, physical objects have their own essence and phenomenon. May be the phenomenon of some other entity. For example, archaeologists can't observe prehistoric civilizations directly. They can only study the things which are left behind. In this sense, we can think of an archaeological artifact like a stone tool as a phenomenon of prehistoric civilization. The tool has its own essence and phenomenon, but it is also itself a phenomenon. A single stone tool can tell archaeologists much about any ancient civilization. However, archaeologists can gather many phenomena, tools, structural ruins, nearby animal bones and seeds, human remains, etc., to look for patterns which reveal more insights about the essence of the prehistoric civilization, which includes those phenomena. Dialectics, in the proper sense, is the study of contradictions in the very essence of objects. Not only are our appearances transitory, mobile, fluid, demarcated only by conventional boundaries, but the essence of things is so as well. Lenin here points out that proper analysis hinges on understanding the essence of a subject, since the phenomenon are fleeting and the subject to change. Most notably, we should look for contradictions within the subject, because contradictions are that driving dialectical development of a subject over time. The meaning and methodology. If we want to be accurately aware of things, phenomenon, and idea, we must not just stop at studying their phenomenons, we have to study their essence. Only through examining many phenomenons of a subject can we fully and correctly understand the essence of said subject. With physical objects, we must study the phenomenon to know things about a subject, since phenomenon is, by definition, that which can be observed. Only through systematic repeating observation can we come to understand the essence of an object which exudes the phenomenon. Because phenomenon can change based on the conditions, we must observe phenomenon under various conditions and in a systematic way. This is the basis of all scientific inquiry. This is also true for analyzing aspects of human society. To understand a social system, we must observe its phenomenon systematically over time and look for patterns which form under various conditions. We must also keep in mind that social systems develop and change over time, and so the essence might develop with or without changes in certain phenomena. For example, a phenomenon of the United States of America have changed significantly over the years. The national flag, military uniforms, seals, and other iconography have changed throughout the history of the U.S. Similarly, there have been many presidents, and the governments and constitution have also been through many changes. That said, the essential nature of the USA's political economy has not changed significantly since its foundations. The U.S. has been a capitalist bourgeois democracy since the beginning and remains so to this day. Regardless of which bourgeois-dominated political party holds power in the White House and Congress, Whig, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, the essential nature of the USA is a capitalist bourgeois democracy has remained the same. According to Lenin, quote, human thought goes endlessly deeper, from appearance to essence, from essence to the first order, as it were to essence of the second order, and so on without end, end quote. On the other hand, essence is what defines a thing, phenomenon, or idea. Therefore, in our perception and practice, we must recognize a thing, phenomenon, or idea based on its essence, not its phenomenon, to evaluate it correcly. And after that, we can make fundamental improvements. For example, thousands of years ago, people observed that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west every day. Based on these phenomenon, many human civilizations developed the belief that the essence of our solar system was that the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun rotated around it. Today, thanks to scientific observation and practice, we have proven that the sun is the center of the solar system and that the Earth is rotating around it, which is totally opposite of what many believed hundreds of years ago. In this case, the essentially observed phenomenon were misleading, and it was only by getting a better grasp of the essential nature of the solar system that we could better comprehend its functioning. It is usually easy to observe phenomenon since they are defined by being observable, but it is also easy to misunderstand relationships between essence and phenomenon. Sometimes people get a false perception of essence from a real phenomenon, such as believing the sun revolves around the earth. Sometimes people attribute the wrong phenomenon to essence as well, such as believing that all poor people are the L word. Phenomenon can easily be mistaken for essence. For example, bourgeois liberal political parties often portray themselves as being pro-worker and therefore exhibit phenomena such as rhetoric, slogans, propaganda, and even platform positions which appeal to workers. These phenomena may confuse many to believe that they are workers' parties. In reality, they are essentially dominated by the capitalist class. The reverse can also occur. For example, workers may be fooled to believe that a ruthless capitalist politician or celebrity is, quote, working class at heart, falsely believing that the capitalist class position is merely a phenomenon when in fact it is essential. Understanding true essence based on real phenomenon is one of the most important aspects of analysis. It is the primary realm of science. In politics, misunderstanding or mischaracterizing essence and phenomenon can reinforce false beliefs about the way society works, which can lead to promulgation of dangerous and reactionary ideologies like neoliberalism and fascism amidst the working class. For this reason, we must avoid examining phenomenon alone. We have to dive deeper to discover and understand the essential nature of things, phenomena, and ideas in our analysis. Number 6, possibility and reality. A category of possibility and reality. A possibility category do we understand phenomenon and essence? Is there any questions before I move on with essence and phenomenon? Anyone have any questions?
So if I'm completely honest with you, no, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I didn't get it from the beginning. But I'm hoping that when I go over the notes, maybe I'll start to understand it more. I don't know.
We'll see. So like the phenomenon is an observable, the essence is the thing that's going inside, because phenomenon is external, S is an eternal, right? One's inwards, one's outwards, right? So an essence can cause a phenomenon, and then a phenomenon can leave an essence, I think, because they work diametric. They're both dialectical. So I don't know. Well, when we go over the notes again, we'll go over it more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
A category of possibilities and reality. The possibility category refers to things that have not happened nor exist in reality yet, but that would happen or would exist given necessary conditions. The reality category refers to things that exist or have existed in reality and in human thought. B, dialectical relationships between possibility and reality. So we're going to go into what is the relationship with each other. Possibility and reality have a unified and inseparable relationship. Possibility can transform into reality, and reality contains new possibilities. And any given possibility, under specific conditions, can transform into reality. Given specific conditions, there could be one or many possibilities for the development of any given thing, phenomenon, or idea. Practical possibility, random possibility, obvious possibility, abstract possibility, near possibility, far possibility, etc. Excerpt from Marxist. Here's it, and now we're putting a pin in it. It looks like we're going to the excerpts of excerpts from Marxist-Leninist textbooks of students who specialize in Marxist-Leninism. Editor's notes in brackets. So we're going to find out. Reality has many aspects. It also has many tendencies of development. These aspects and tendencies of reality have different roles and positions in the development process of reality. For example, manifesting any given possibility into reality requires us to change a specific subject from one status to a different status. Some subjects are easier to transform and others are more difficult to transform. Some requires us to change quality. Others only require quantity change. Because reality has many aspects and tendencies of development, it is useful to classify possibility. There are at least 4 types of possibility in 2 separate categories. The categorization below draws a distinction between the obvious and the practical. The obvious is that which will certainly occur. If you drop an object, it will obviously fall. The practical is that which we certainly could make occur through human will. If you are holding an object, you could practically drop it. Obviously, possibility and random possibility. Obvious possibility and random possibility. Obvious possibility refers to possibility that will happen because conditions to make it happen are set in place so that the possibility developing into reality is unavoidable. If the conditions arise for a hurricane to form, it eventually becomes obvious that a hurricane will form. Random possibility is possibility which may or may not happen depending on how external factors developed, or actions, the actions of others, etc. Whether or not a hurricane may develop on any given day is, from our human perspective, random, since we do not have any technology to cause or prevent the development of hurricanes. Other events may be more or less random. We can, for instance, prepare for an incoming hurricane to minimize the risk of harm of human communities. Second, based on the practical relationships between subject, we have practical possibility versus abstract possibility. So many different possibilities. Practical possibility means that conditions in reality which could make something happen are already in place. If you have all the ingredients, knowledge, and equipment needed to make a pie, you could make a pie. The material conditions are in place. Abstract possibility is possibility which may become reality in the future, but the conditions which would make it possibility become reality have not yet developed. It is an abstract possibility that you could make a pie even if you don't have the tools, ingredients, or knowledge. It is possible in the abstract that you could buy ingredients and equipment and learn the necessary skills to make a pie. Near possibility simply refers to possibility which may become reality in the short term. Far possibility refers to things which may happen in more distant future, relative to the subject being discussed. In social life, in order to transform a possibility into reality, there must be objective conditions and subjective factors. Subjective factors include the ability of humans to change possibility into reality. Objective conditions refer to the situation needed to make such a change occur. In other words, humans are able to subjectively change possibility into reality, but only when the objective circumstances exist in the external world. Meaning of the methodology. We must base our perception and practice on reality. Lenin said, quote, Marxism takes its stand on the facts and not on possibilities. A Marxist must, as the foundation of his policy, put forth only precisely and unquestionably demonstrated facts. However, in our perception and practice, we also need to comprehensively recognize possibility which could arise from reality. This will allow us to develop methods of practical operations which are suitable to changes and developments which might occur. We must actively make use of subjective factors to participation and practice, in turn, possibility into reality whenever it would serve our purpose. This idea is perhaps best exemplified in the traditional Vietnamese proverb, quote, you can't just open your mouth and wait for fruit to drop into your mouth, end quote. We have to actively apply our will through practice and labor to develop the best possibilities into manifested realities. Number 4, basic law of materialist dialectics. Laws are the regular, common, obvious, natural, and objective relations between internal aspects, factors, and attributes of a thing or a phenomenon, or between things and phenomena. There are many types of law in this world, and they all have different prevalence, reach, characteristics, and roles in regard to the motion and development process of things and phenomena in nature, society, and human thought. So, it is necessary to classify different laws for humans to understand and apply them effectively into practical activities. Classifying laws based on prevalence, we have private laws, common laws, and universal laws. Private laws are laws that only apply to a specific range of things and phenomena. For example, laws of mechanical motion, laws of chemical motion, laws of biological motion, etc. Common laws are laws that apply to a broader range of subjects than private laws, and they impact many different subjects. For instance, the law of preservation of mass, the law of preservation of energy, etc. Universal laws are laws that impact every aspect of natural society, nature, society, and human thought. Materialist dialectics is the study of these universal laws. If we classify laws based on the reach of impact, we will have three main groups: law of nature, law of society, and the laws of human thought. Laws of nature are laws that arise in the natural world, including within the human body. They are not products of human conscious activities. Laws of society are the laws of human activity and social relations. These laws only apply to the conscious activity of humans, yet they are still objective. We have already discussed how relations between human beings are objective. By extension, human relations which compose human societies are objective, and thus, any laws which govern objective human relations must also be objective. Marx's assertion that human social relations are objective is critical to understanding his works. Marx pointed out that social relations may not be physical in the sense that they can't be observed directly by human senses, but that they still have an objective character. They exist externally to a given subject, and they have objective impacts on reality. For instance, class relations between the capitalist class and the working class results in objective manifestations in reality, such as wealth accumulation, modes of circulation, etc. Human laws of human thought are laws that laws of the intrinsic relationships between concepts, categories, judgments, inferences, and the development process of human rational awareness. As the science of common relations and development, materialist dialectics studies the universal laws that influence the entire natural world, human society, and human thought, all together as a whole. These universal laws are: 1. The law of transformation between quantity and quality, the law of unification and contradictions between opposites, the law of negation of negation. Each of these laws is considered universal because they apply to all things, phenomena, and ideas, in all the internal and external relations, thereof, in human perception and practice. All things, phenomena, and idea change and develop as a result of mutual impact and relationships in accordance with these universal laws. Of the fundamental law, materialist dialectics is the study of these universal laws and their unity. Number 1, law of transformation between quantity and quality. The law of transformation between quantity and quality is a universal law which concerns the universal mode of motion and development process of nature, society, and human thought. Remember, the mode refers to how something exists, functions, and develops. The universal mode of motion and development processes thus refers to how all things, ideas, and phenomena move, change, and develop. Frederick Engel defines the law of transformation between quantity and quality in Dialectics of Nature. the law of the transformation of quantity into quality and vice versa. For our purpose, we could express this by saying that in nature, in a matter exactly fixed to each individual case, qualitative change can only occur by a quantitative addition or subtraction of matter in motion, so-called energy. In other words, quantitative changes is things, phenomenons, and ideas lead to quality shift. The universal mode of motion and development processes follows the law of transformation between quantity and quality, which states qualitative changes of things, phenomenons, and ideas arise from the inevitable basis of the quantitative changes of things, phenomenons, and ideas, and vice versa. Quantitative changes of things, phenomenons, and ideas arise from the inevitable basis of qualitative changes of things, phenomenons, and idea. Put simply, I laughed a little bit. Quantity changes develop into quality changes. The quality changes lead to quantity changes. We say that these changes of quantity and quality occur on the inevitable basis one another, because quality changes always invariably arise from quantity changes, and likewise quantity changes always invariably rise from quality changes. Just as quantity shifts, which is the amount, lead to a shift, a quality shift being something else, it is so true that quality shift leads to quantity shift. For example, if you have 11 donuts, then add 1 donut, you now have 1 dozen donuts. If you add 12 more donuts, you would then have 2 dozen donuts. Another example of quality shift leading to quantity shift would be a pond filled with rainwater. Once enough drops of water collect, and the pond is considered full. That is to say, once it is considered to be a pond of water, we will no longer think of the pond in terms of drops. We would think of the pond as filled, overfilled, underfilled, etc. Note that both of these examples are related to our human perceptions and understanding of the material world. The material world does not change based on our perceptions, nor how we classify the quality of a given subject. These are also objective aspects related to quality shifts leading to quantity shifts. For example, if we adjust the quantity of the temperature of a sheet of paper to the point of burning, and the paper burns, then the quantity of the paper would be reduced to from 1 sheet to 0 sheets. In other words, the quality shift arises from temperature quantity increases, i.e. the paper burning into ashes results in a quantity shift in how many pieces of paper exist, from 1 sheet to 0 sheets. However, even this is ultimately a subjective assessment rooted in human consciousness, since we subjectively think in terms of sheets of paper, and the concept of a sheet of paper is essentially a classification rooted in human consciousness. It is merely an abstract way of perceiving and considering the quantity and quality of material subject which we think of as paper. The law of transformation between quantity and quality is an inevitable, objective, and universal relationship that repeats in every motion and developed processes of all things, phenomenons, and ideas in nature, human society, and human thought. Definitions of quality and quantity. Definition of quality. Quality refers to the organic unity which exists amongst the component parts of a thing, phenomenon, or idea that distinguishes it from other things, phenomena, and ideas. Note, we have already given basic definitions of quantity and quality in annotate. Okay, what follows are more comprehensive philosophical definitions of quality and quantity. Our world exists as one continuity of matter. All things and phenomenon in our universe exist essentially as one unified system, namely the entity which we call the universe. This unified nature of existence is extremely difficult for human beings to comprehend. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel pointed out that in this sense, the unity of pure being is indistinguishable from nothingness. The science of logic, Hegel noted that if we try to comprehend a pure material existence as a whole without distinguishing any components with any component thing or phenomenon from any other, then all is incomprehensible. Human consciousness needs to delineate, distinguish the component parts of this unified system from each other in order to make sense of all of it. Pure light and pure darkness are two voids which are the same thing. Something can be distinguished only in determinate light or darkness. For this reason, it is only darkened light and illuminated darkness which have within themselves the moment of difference and are therefore determinate being. The human mind is evolved to perceive various things, phenomena, and ideas as differentiated. Quality is the basis of which we perceive subjects as distinct from one another. Everything, phenomenon, and idea is composed of internal components and relations. The unity of these internal components and relations is what we refer to as quality. For example, a human being's quality refers to the unity of all the internal components and relationships of which a human being is composed, i.e. the cells, organs, blood, etc., as well as the thought memories, etc., which make the human. In unity, quality is also the subjective phenomenon, the reflection of a material world in human consciousness. Therefore, we may conceive of various qualities for the same subject, but we can think of 12 donuts as a box of donuts, a dozen donuts, or as 12 individual donuts. We could consider a building as one apartment building or 40 apartments, depending on the viewpoint of the analysis. So objective and inherent attributes from the quality of things, phenomena, and ideas, but we must not confuse quality and attribute with one another. Everything, phenomenon, and idea has both fundamental and non-fundamental attributes. Only fundamental attributes constitute the quality of things, phenomena, and ideas. When the fundamental attribute change, the quality also changes. The distinction between fundamental and non-fundamental attributes of things, phenomena, and idea must depend on the purpose of the analysis. The same attribute may be fundamental when analyzing with one purpose, but not fundamental when analyzing with another purpose. Whether or not an attribute is considered fundamental, quote unquote, depends entirely on conscious perspectives. For example, one baker may consider chocolate chip to be fundamental for baking cookies, while another baker may not. This subjective characteristics of what might be considered fundamental or not is reflected in how we consider quality. If you are trying to determine how much water you need to fill a swimming pool, you may think of a pool in terms of size. This is an Olympic size pool. But if you just want to go for a swim, you are likely just to think in terms of water levels, i.e., the pool is empty. We can't swim. If you are planning the construction of a school and want to know how many classrooms it will need, you might think in terms of classrooms of students. But if you are considering funding for a school year, you might consider the total number of students. The quality of things, phenomena, and ideas is determined by the qualities of its component parts. Qualities are composed of qualities combined in unity. A swimming pool may consist of a certain amount of concrete in a specific configuration combined with 5,000 gallons of water. A car may be composed of a body, an engine, 4 tires, etc. Each individual component exists as a quality, a unit of component attributes in and of itself. Quality is also determined by the structures and connections between component parts, which manifest in specific relations. Therefore, distinction between fundamental and non-fundamental attributes is also relative. It is not just the component parts of a subject which define this quality, but also the relations of those component parts. For instance, a quantity of wood and nails configured in one set of structural relations may have a quality of a chair, whereas the same component parts arranged with different structures and relationships may have a quality of a table. In this sense, quality can be thought of as a synthesis of a content and form, a thing, phenomenon, or idea from a certain perspective. For example, if we see 2 shoes, we may think of each shoe as an individual qualitative subject. 2 shoes. On the other hand, we may think of the shoes together as a single qualitative subject in terms of its utility and in terms of synthesis of content and form, a pair of shoes. So much so that if one shoe is lost, then the remaining shoe is considered useless and discarded as trash. Because there are countless ways in which quality, the configuration and relations and composition of constitute parts of any given subject can manifest, we must recognize that quality itself, based on the distinction between fundamental and non-fundamental attributes, is a relative and subjective phenomenon of human consciousness. Any given subject will have multiple qualities depending on the relations which exist between and within that subject and other subjects. Hello. Welcome, Gabby. You can see here. Okay. Where was I at? You can consider things, phenomena as a part of the apart from quality. Quality inhabits the subject relatively stability. Remember that quality is the way in which a human mind conceives of the world as a collection of distinct things, phenomena, and idea. These perceptions of quality are purely relative, but they are important because they are what allow us to develop an understanding of a complicated system of things, phenomena, and ideas which make up our universe. In our perception, quality represents the relatively stability of a thing, phenomenon, or idea, which makes it a subject that we can consider and analyze in and of itself. Understanding how we distinguish between different subjects is critical in developing a scientific understanding of the world, which is rooted in observation and practice. Definition of quantity. Quantity refers to the amount or extent of specific attributes of things, phenomena, and ideas, including but not limited to the amount of component parts, scale or size, speed or rhythm of motion. A thing, phenomenon, or idea can have many quantities, with each quantity determined by different criteria, i.e., a car may be measured by many criteria of quantity, such as the length in meters, weight in kilograms, speed in kilometers per hour, etc. Quality and quantity embody two different aspects of the same subject. Both quality and quantity exist subjectively. However, the distinction between quality and quantity in the process of perceiving things, phenomena, and ideas has only relative significance in attributes may be considered. Quantity from one perspective, but quality from another perspective. If you are filling a box with a dozen donuts, then once you add the 12th donut, 1 dozen may represent the quality which you seek. For the perspective of a customer buying dozens donuts for a party, dozen may represent the quantity. In other words, you need to make an order, quality of 3 dozen donuts, quantity. And the manager of the store at the end of the day may tally 20 orders, quantity, as the day's sales goal, quality. Quantity and quality, therefore, are both considered relatively based on perspectives and the purpose of analysis at hand. B. Dialectical relationships between quantity and quality. Everything, phenomenon, and idea exists as a unity of two aspects, quality and quantity. Quantity and quality do not exist separately from one another. Quantity and quality dialectically and mutually impact one another. Change in quantity leads to changes in quality. However, not every change in quantity will cause a change in quality. In order for quantity change to lead to quality change, a certain amount must be met. This amount is called the threshold, which is explained further below in this section. A threshold may be exact and known, i.e., it takes exactly 12 donuts to make a dozen donuts, or it may be relative and unknown, i.e., a certain quantity of air inflated into a balloon may cause it to burst, but the exact specific quantity of air may be relative to other factors such as air temperature and may be unknown to the observer until the balloon actually bursts. With any given subject, there will be a range of quantity changes which can accumulate without leading to change in quality. This range is called the quantity range. Quantity range is defined as the relationship between quantity and quality, the range of intervals in which the change of quantity does not substantially change the quality of a given subject. Within the limits of a quantity range, the subject retains the same quality. And here we go. A donut, quantity range. A dozen, there's 12. It's just quantities. The quantity range is a range of quantities between qualitative shifts. So here we go. Quantity range can be thought of as a range of quantities which exists between threshold. For instance, between the qualities of 1 donut and 1 dozen donuts, there is a quantity range of 10, 2 dozen through 11 donuts, which can be added before the quality shift of 1 dozen donuts. You can keep adding additional donuts up to the quantity of 11 donuts without reaching the threshold of a qualitative shift to 1 dozen donuts. This is the quality range between the quantity range between the qualities of donuts and 1 dozen donut. Again, the quantity range is relative to the perspective of the nature of analysis. One person may only be concerned with dozen of donuts, while the other may consider the quality of half a dozen, which would consider a qualitative shift to 1/2 dozen donuts to occur once the 6th donut quantity is added. 1/2 dozen. Okay. You have another picture coming up. Motion and change usually begins with change in quantity. Even when changes in quantity reach a certain amount, quality will also change. Amount or degree of quantity change at which quality change occurs is called the threshold. Note, you see the water being poured in, the threshold of a glass of water. You see the little marks, little dash marks, that's the threshold, I'm guessing. Note that the threshold is approximate range. At a certain quantity, a glass may be considered half full, and at another certain quantity, after passing the threshold, the glass will be considered full, though there may be a wider range of quantities in which a glass would be considered to have the quality of being full, depending on the perspective and purpose of the analysis. When quantity change meets a threshold within necessary and specific conditions, quality will change. This change in quality, which takes place in the motion and development process of things, phenomena, and ideas, is called a quality shift. Here you go. 1/2 cup of water. Quantity increases. Quantity range, it increases to a full cup of water. That's the qualitative shift. A qualitative shift occurs when the quantity changes beyond a threshold, leading to a change in quality. Quality shifts, I think we're good. Oh my gosh, hurry up. There we go. Quality shifts inevitably occur as transformation in the development process of things, phenomena, and ideas. Qualitative changes can be expressed or manifested through many forms of quality shifts, which are determined by the contradictions, characteristics, and conditions of a given subject, including such characteristics as fast or slow, big or small, partial or entire, spontaneous or intentional. Quality shifts are inevitable because there is no thing, phenomenon, nor idea which can exist statically forever without ever undergoing change. Eventually, any given subject will undergo quality shifts, even if such transformation will take millions of years to occur. Quality shifts can take various forms, depending on the nature of internal and external relationships, contradictions, mutual impacts. For instance, a river may dry up, or it may flood depending on internal and external relations and characteristics, but it will not simply flow at the same level forever without ever undergoing any qualitative shifts. The rate and degree of quality shifts are very considerable based on such internal and external factors, and may be spontaneous, that is to say, without human interaction. Without human intervention, or may be the result of an intentional, conscious action of human beings. Here we go. Quantity range A, 1 to 2. Quality shift B, 2 to 3. C, period of motion. So A, B, okay, so we're going to read it. The quantity range A refers to the range of quantities between two qualities in the process of development. The quality shift B refers to the point at which quantity accumulates to the point of changing the quality of the developing subject. The period of motion C includes both the quantity range and the qualitative shift themselves. Thank you. We're doing on time. Okay. Period of motion refers to the development which occurs between two quality shifts, including the quality shifts themselves. Period of motion differs from quantity range because quantity range only includes the range of quantity change which can occur between qualitative shifts without including quality shifts themselves. For example, a period of motion for a cup filled with water from a half cup would include all of the change which occurs from the cup being half full to a cup becoming entirely full. The quantity range of this same process would only include the quantities of water that stand between half full and full, where the cup is neither considered to be half full or full, but somewhere in between, i.e. between qualitative shifts. Qualitative shifts represent discontinuity within a continuous development process of things and phenomena. In the material world, all things, phenomena, and ideas are constantly undergoing continuous sequences of quantitative changes leading to quality shifts, creating an endless line of nodes showing how all things, phenomena, and idea move and develop to increasingly advanced degrees. As Frederick Engels summarizes, merely quantitative change beyond a certain point passes into qualitative differences. Process of change and development in our universe is continuously ongoing. Whenever a qualitative shift occurs, it represents a brief discontinuity in the sense that we perceive a definite and distinct transformation from one thing, phenomenon, or idea to another. In other words, we can distinguish between the mode of existence of a thing, phenomenon, or idea before and after the qualitative shift. Take, for example, the lifespan of a house. A human being could easily distinguish between the empty land which exists before the house is built, the construction site which exists as it's being built, and the house itself, once constructed, is completed. In reality, this process of change is continuous, but on our human perception, each qualitative shift represents a definite and distinct period of change and discontinuity in terms of our perception of the thing, which is the house. This is related to historical perspectives of things, phenomena, and ideas in which we recognize the continuity of existence between different stages of development of things, phenomena, and ideas. When a qualitative shift occurs, there is an impact of quantity. Quality impacts quantity in a number of ways, including, but not limited to, change in structure, scale, or level of the subject, changing the rhythm or speed of motion and development of the subject. In summary, dialectical unity between quantity and quality exists in everything, phenomenon, and idea. A gradual quantitative change through the quantity range will eventually meet the threshold, which will inevitably lead to a qualitative change through qualitative shifts. Simultaneously, the new qualitative will mutually impact the quantity, causing new quantitative changes of things, phenomena, and ideas. This process takes place continuously, forming the fundamental and universal mode of movement and development, processes of all things, phenomena, and ideas. Transformation between quantity and quality is a mode of movement and development of all things, phenomena, and idea, because it reflects the way in which human consciousness perceives movement and development. So, it is important to understand that there is no material manifestation of quality. There are simply mental constructions which reflect the ways in which we observe and understand change, motion, and development of things, phenomena, and ideas. And understand change, and ideas. Transformation process in the material world are fully fluid and continuous, but our consciousness perceives change and in stages of development. Quality simply reflects how we distinguish one subject from another subject, as well as how we recognize and recognize the transformation process, a stage of development, a single subject over time. There is no specific point, metaphysically distinct point at which a puppy becomes an adult dog. But human beings will distinguish between a puppy and an adult dog, or recognize at a certain point that the puppy has become an adult dog based on observation of quantity. Here we go. Quality shift of a single subject over time. Puppy to adult. Quality shift difference between two subjects, a cat and a dog. Quality refers to the differences which are distinguished in human consciousness between one subject and another, or changes in a subject form over time. Thank you. All right, real quick, I'm gonna look ahead. I gotta get past meaning and methodology, I think. Actually, I better go back up. Where's that? Oh, right there. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm looking ahead a little bit. Everybody remember page 196?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Thank you. Okay, we could stop at law of unification and contradictions. Well, we'll stop at 199. What was I at?
196.
196. Okay, good. There is no metaphysically distinct point at which a puppy becomes an adult dog. Human beings will distinguish between puppy and an adult dog, or recognize that at a certain point that the puppy has become an adult dog based on observation of quality. We create categories which reflect quality to organize and systematically understand the world around us, and to distinguish between different subjects, and to distinguish between different stages of development of a given subject. We can also distinguish differences of quality between different subjects. We can distinguish a cat from a dog. We can distinguish one dog from another dog. These distinguishing attributes constitute difference in quality. Note that this conception of differentiation of things, phenomena, and ideas into qualities, which constantly change and develop over time, is fundamentally distinct from metaphysical categorization, which seeks to divide all things, phenomena, and ideas into static, perpetually unchanged categories. Distinctions within the human mind is reflected in the concepts of quantity and quality. If we do not observe quality differences between subjects, then we would not be able to distinguish between different subjects at all. If we could not recognize the quality shifts of any given subject, then we would not be aware of change or motion at all. Meaning and methodology. Everything, phenomenon, and idea has characteristics of quality and quantity, which mutually impact and transform one another. Therefore, in perception and practice, we need to understand to take into account